Okay, we're doing quotes, and some of this is from my book, Holy Grail Wisdom Quotes, but there's other stuff in here that I added after I wrote the book, plus some stuff was too bulky. So a lot of this Peter Elbow stuff, I think actually most of it or all of it's not in the book, okay? This is just stuff I added to my list of quotes, because I have this giant thousands of pages of quotes. So this is not in the book if you're interested, but this is still worth hearing. First of all, just briefly, one thing from Lauren Isley. She wrote that it is frequently the tragedy of the great artist, as it is of the great scientist, that he frightens the ordinary man. Yeah, that's my experience. All these internal medicine doctors I know, they're all kind of like scared to talk to me, scared to invite me. I've rewritten their textbooks, okay? And they don't like the idea, oh crap, now they got to relearn a whole new system. They don't want that. They just want to ease out their careers. That's yielded a pill, send a bill. And that's like, anybody who's great is going to be several standards of deviation more intense, more over the top than the average regular person in that field. So they're kind of frightening to regular people in the field because a lot of people, what they want to do is just get a job, make money, and coast through it. They don't have any aspiration towards excellence or greatness or unique discovery. So when somebody comes along who does, it kind of freaks them out a little bit. That's just a fact. We talked about the Hollingsworth communication gap before. If somebody's 2 or more standard deviations more knowledgeable in a field, to the person who knows less, they can seem odd or strange. Okay, she says, the genius is feared as an image breaker. Frequently, he does not accept the opinions of the mass or man's opinion of himself. The great artist is known for his absolute unexpectedness. Some degree of withdrawal serves to nurture man's creative powers. Yeah, when you get on the cutting edge, you want to read the work of other persons on the cutting edge. You don't want to just pretend that the fake stuff is real. Okay, it's like if you're an art professor, if you really want to do great art, you study the masters and you add your own little thing to it. You don't pretend that modern art is real and be just another phony BS artist like so many do. You don't sell out, okay? A real great creative genius wants to do great work. They don't want to sell out and be a wuss. Okay, let's see. Numerous observers have testified to the loneliness of this process. Okay, yep. Okay, fine. Now here's sort of the main topic. We're going to talk about Peter Elbow. And Peter Elbow, I like him. He's an interesting guy. He lived from 1935 to 2025. And he was a writing teacher who had a lot of problems. He kind of ended up being like the little engine who could. He struggled. It was not easy for him to learn how to write well. And I think the fact that it was so difficult for him to learn how to write enabled him to be a better teacher. He actually went to Harvard, to get a degree in learning how to write, and he flunked out. He just couldn't handle it. But then he later on went back, and he did very well. He had too much writer's block his first time around. And he came up with some good suggestions. And how did I get so interested in this? I had written a book called Straight A at Stanford and on to Harvard, which is mostly about study skills, but was a little bit of an autobiography as well of myself up to that point. And I showed it to a bunch of friends. I got a bunch of friends who are lawyers, and they looked at the book, and they all started laughing at me. They go, oh, your punctuation is wrong here, your grammar's right here, wrong here, your syntax is wrong here, you should spell this number, not write it. So anyways, they thought it was funny that my writing, by their standards, was sloppy. And, I got an A in my writing class at Stanford. I thought I knew what I was doing. I write in the charts all the time. I talk to people all the time. But after hearing all their criticisms, I looked up everything they said, and I realized they were right. So I said, you know what? I got to learn how to write. So I started reading all these books on writing, all these essays and stuff, and I came across Peter Elbow's books, and I thought he had a couple good points, okay? He's like the little engine that could in the world of writing and teaching. He emphasized vernacular, like Dante's Divine Comedy. Write in the vernacular, people understand it. And finally, the rule that I came to that helps me the most out of all of them is I just imagine I'm talking to one of my smart friends, and I explain stuff exactly like I would to my smart friend. And, when you're talking to one of your friends, you try to make them laugh. You try to say something interesting. And people sometimes criticize me. They go, oh, you should simplify things. You get into too much technical detail, too much jargon, and you overwhelm the average viewer, the average reader. And my attitude is, look, I try to be helpful, but basically, if somebody finds my site and they're interested, they're not average, okay? There's a lot smarter than average. And I have a lot of experience dealing with average people. Average people don't read. They're functional illiterates, okay? So I don't feel there's any point in trying to focus things at their level because they have no cognitive energy, no cognitive interest. The kind of person who's going to like me or want to hear what I have to say is somebody who's pretty smart and is seeking information. So I will speak in such a way to provide information. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and dumb it down for lazy dummies who don't even care about my site. Okay, think how hard it is to get one of your friends to read a book. It's not easy. Okay, only motivated people are going to come to the site. So that's all I talk. Like I talk to my doctor buddies. Whenever I get something interesting, I call up the phone. One of my doctor buddies go, "What do you think of this? What do you think of this?" Okay, so what are some of the things that he also spoke about? He spoke about free writing. He said, when you're starting out, just start writing randomly about the topic. Don't even worry where it's going at all. And that's a little bit of the idea of free associating. Don't inhibit your subconscious when you write. That's all fine. Like you can't write an outline first before you write a paper because you'll run into writer's block if you try to do that. Put everything in order right from the beginning before you figured it all out yet. But a good thing to do is to make one of those mind maps where you put the main subject in the center and then just connect everything to it around it in the periphery. And then when you start to write, you'll start to get a sense of the order. But by not being forced to put it in order with a mind map, you can get all your ideas down into one plan, one sheet of paper to plan it, and then you can put all the other stuff in there later. Okay, so it's sort of like, write your rough draft like a free association, then go back and edit the next day more carefully, okay? And everybody knows this intuitively, and I can tell you one of the best things you can do if you have to give a presentation or write a paper is have a conversation with a friend and talk all about the subject, have them ask you questions, ask them to challenge your arguments and stuff, so you're kind of ready for those questions, and then go and write it. Okay, that works pretty well. Or go and give your talk. Okay, revise by ear. So he's pretty good by that. And other people said it too, and it's obviously a good point. That's how the great writers all write. You read it back to yourself, sometimes out loud, and you get a sense. You get to feel it. Try to feel the intonation units. And, where you feel a brief pause, put a comma. Where you feel a big pause, put a period. And he calls this rhetorical punctuation. Punctuation not based so much on grammar, but the way the sounds flow, how it sounds. And I think that's good advice. So he calls this rhetorically based punctuation. When you punctuate by ear, a period has the sound of closure or letting go. A comma has the sound of non-closure, of not quite letting go, of hanging on. And I think it's very important to write well, and it's important to communicate well, because again, in this world, people kind of take you to some extent for how you present yourself. And if you make it pretty darn clear, you can speak up for yourself when you need to, and you are articulate, and if somebody messes with you, you're willing to fight back and speak up, they're going to be less likely to mess with you. I cannot tell you how many people I've seen treated like dirt because they're intellectually wimpy. They can't write, they can't speak that well, and so they get bullied and they can't say or do anything about it. Okay, so, you don't want to be arguing or with people, but at the same time, you want to have the ability should the need arise. I can also tell you, like with my kids, I would often kind of mock and tease my kids about just silly stuff, whatever it might be. And they would get a little annoyed and they'd yell at me at first. But a couple of years would go by and my kids would be, junior high to high school or something. They go, Dad, all that stuff about you teasing us in the kitchen and arguing with us and stuff, they go, it's good. Because when we talk to our friends, we play all those games and we talk and we argue with our friends, and we're good at arguing just because we've had those play arguments with you in the kitchen. I said, well, good. You got to practice. You want to be good at talking repartee. You gotta talk, and you get a sense too when you read. Are you reading just to enjoy the story? That's great, but sometimes you want to read to get a sense of how the writer does it. And Peter Elbow talks about that. Other writers that talk about that. If you take out the commas, you get a stream of consciousness effect. You can also do it, you can write like Hemingway, real short and macho. And when you get a sense, it's called, reading like a reader to enjoy the story versus reading like a writer. Other people have written about this, like Frank Smith. A lot of people have. It's just, the awareness of it. You get better at language when you're more aware of the subtlety, the nuance, okay? Okay. So he calls those intonation units. He says, instead of writing in sentences, think of yourself as writing in intonation units and then decide how you're going to handle the punctuation. Again, the goal is to make it more conversational. Okay, and that's good advice. He says, play with your punctuation, use bold print. I like to use bold print, subheadings, and sometimes, have a backward gray annotation box. Just things to make it more entertaining for the reader, because your goal is to, keep the reader reading, to make it engaging, to make them want to read. So you have to entertain the reader, and I call it infotainment. You should be providing useful information to the reader, and it should also be enjoyable. Because think about it when your dad would teach you stuff, or when your mom would teach you stuff. It's kind of fun. They're like, don't you think you should do this? And you're like, oh, gee, you're right, when your parents would tell you stuff. Okay, and that's how real learning and teaching should be. School is not reality. School's more like something you have to do to get a degree, to get your ticket punched to move to the next level. But real learning, something you want to learn, like you talk to your friends, how should I talk to my girlfriend? I don't, this is my situation. And your friend will coach you, and you're going to pay attention to that. You're going to try that next time you talk to her. That's real learning, because you want to know it. You remember it. Learning how to drive a car. Okay, Peter Elbow, he's pretty good at classifying things. What's the difference between speech and writing? How speech is more casual, a lot more, intonation units rather than full sentences, short sentences, sentence fragments. It's more social, a lot of, metacognition, and they call them phatic phrases. You know what I mean, Vern? Okay, stuff like that. Remember Vern, Halloween, Scared Stupid, all that stuff? Those were really funny movies. I liked all the Vern movies. Okay, speech for more familiar topics. Okay. The goal of conversation is to entertain a friend. Okay, we're getting towards something here. A lot of this is just this classification of stuff. Speech is made with the mouth, writing with the hand. Okay, speech is a dialogue, writing is a monologue. Actually, when I write, I write like I'm having a conversation with the person, so I try to anticipate their questions and answer them. The key is that the writer's voice should be guiding the reader like a friend. That makes it a lot easier to read and a lot more entertaining. And also, I just put in there whatever I think fits the moment. So, on the one hand, I get criticism for that because I told you, like my friend told me, he said, your books will never be allowed in any university, any school whatsoever. Too many jokes, too many pictures, too many religious references, philosophical statements that will not ever be considered acceptable. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm not writing for them. I'm writing to make my book good for the smart reader who finds it. Okay. The story holds everything together, so you got to make everything flow with the story. That's the key priority. But you also got to have that voice. It's the author's voice that helps hold it all together, that helps the audience, that anticipates their questions and answers them. And he also talks about an itch and a scratch. That's like a question-answer format. The question creates anticipation and a desire to know that answer. And then you answer it. But that itch and scratch, challenge, rhetorical question, answer, rhetorical question, answer. That makes it a lot more fun. Metacognition, engagement strategies, all that stuff is good. And sort of a surging individualism also makes it fun. Like when your friend talks to you, that's your friend talking to you. And you know how Joey talks to you. You know how Billy talks to you, okay? Billy talks like Billy, Joey talks like Joey. They got distinct voices. And that's good writing has that, okay? All this generic stuff, objective and all that, that's all BS because when you read The Good Scientist, they put a story into the writing. It's more like a narrative. Look like Douglas Kell. He's a very good science writer. Like one of his papers about iron was Iron Behaving Badly. Now that's a fun title. And he tells a story of all the problems free iron causes in the body. He makes it entertaining. His paper's easy to read. On the other hand, you get some paper written by a committee of 20 authors, and they're trying to be objective. It's all dry, and it's so painful to read. And again, Peter Elbow says they're trying to make their arguments impregnable, okay, but they pursue that at the expense of making them unreadable and boring, okay? Good writing can be entertaining and readable at the same time. And all the other basic concepts. Binary opposition makes things memorable and entertaining. I love Ayn Rand's statement, art is a concretization of metaphysics. So get your metaphysics right. And your metaphysics should be to make your writing useful, helpful, and fun. Okay, and if you do that, it'll tend to come out that way. Okay, here's a good quote by Peter Elbow. Interesting essays are more often guided by a narrative flavor than by a static scheme, like here are the 3 reasons for X. Okay, literature or story, it's like a bridge, between the purely academic information and regular speech. Okay, I know I'm kind of going through a lot of stuff here. And again, this is just, I basically just wrote all this down real fast after I finished reading his book so I would have it available. But the key point is what I said earlier. You write like you're talking to one of your smart friends, and you try to make it fun, you try to make it entertaining, you try to make it useful, and you just be yourself. And anybody who likes you and likes what you have to say, they're going to like it. Okay, and if they don't like it and they don't like you, they're not going to like anything you do anyways, so don't bother with them. They're not going to be interested in any of your future writing anyway, so don't waste time. You can't change who you are and what you are. All you can do is be the best version of yourself, so try to be that. Okay? And he says, when you write something, ask yourself, have you said what you meant to say? Is it clear? Is it, is the beginning good? Is the ending good? Is there some fun stuff in the middle to make people want to read it, that it's worth their time? He really emphasizes voice, and I think that's a great point. And listen to what he says. He says, somehow for me to enjoy reading something, it has to feel real. It has to have a voice, a resonance. It has to ring true with authenticity, sincerity. Writing with no voice is dead, mechanical, faceless. Yeah, like artificial intelligence. I think AI sucks, okay? It lacks any sound or individuality. Good writing with a voice, has a fluency, a rhythm, a liveliness. It's like an enjoyable conversation, okay? And then Peter Elbow says, what if this hypothesis of his about voice is correct? Well, if that's true, and it seems to be true, then voice is the most important thing, more important than anything else. When you revise your writing, revise for voice. Read it out loud. Okay, and I think he has a good point. The best writers, like I'll tell you something, that Anthony J., yeah, he may be, kind of a little bit of a moron when it comes to nutrition because he's hanging out with the paleo keto crowd, which he has to do for the money. But I'm telling you, you read his book, Estrogen Generation. It's magnificent. It's magnificent. He did a fantastic job of writing like he was telling the story to a friend. And it's brilliant. It really is brilliant. I think he's a great chemist. I think he's just playing along with the paleo keto guys because they've got all the audience and he needs that to make money. His living financially depends on that, to pay his bills and feed his family, all right? For me, I just make this YouTube channel as a hobby so I don't have to play those games, all right? All right, but that was the key things, that idea of voice and talking to an intelligent friend. And Peter Elbow didn't even say that about talking to an intelligent friend, but that puts together everything he has to say. And I could tell it was right. The more I studied writing, that's kind of like what it all comes down to. So anyways, I hope that was interesting.